This time on KEI Fabrication.
Alright, so I'm going to try and get the brake drum off. These are frozen right now, and I need this car to be a roller. Plus I need to see what kind of condition the brake shoes are in. Alright folks, so let me explain. What you do for your grandkids, right?
Hurry up, we're gonna go all the way down.
Getting ready to go on another little reconnaissance mission.
Nice.
Hey folks, my name is Mike. This is KEI Fabrication, and welcome to my shop. We've got a bunch more new projects in the queue. We're looking forward to meeting more of you, and for those of you who've been with the channel for a while, thanks so much for watching. I appreciate your comments and the interaction and encouragement. I hopefully through this project we've gained some credibility with you folks, and let's see what's coming up next. Can you believe it? The post is in the way. Well, I was able to get the axle out. These are pretty beefy axles. If I remember correctly, these rear ends were intending on running like old 3/4 ton Chevy truck axles. So pretty beefy. And then that was to get the full floater feature to take the stress off of the axles with the big tires. Alright, so I'm going to try and get the brake drum off. These are frozen right now, and I need this car to be a roller. Plus I need to see what kind of condition the brake shoes are in. Well, I'm going to end up replacing everything in there if I can. I'm hoping that those are some sort of automotive application that I can either get through a vintage supplier, something to that effect. Anyway, we'll figure it out. Alright, so if I believe that probably hasn't been undone since 1969, because the picture that I have of the big wreck, this axle was broken and the wheel was long gone. So that had to been put back together, obviously. And so sometime around late 69, early 1970, that probably hasn't been apart. That's a big outer wheel bearing, yes.
Chances
doggy. Hey. Looks like we had probably an axle bearing seal leaking for a long time. The shoes are all coated with grease, so I'll have to figure that out. Man, if I could save those pads, that'd be wonderful. They're actually in pretty good shape. Alright, so you can see that this one has definitely been a victim of sitting for quite a long time. It's not super horrible, but it all needs to be replaced and updated to be safe. Amazingly, the pads are in good shape. The bearing obviously got some water in it, and the drums are going to definitely need to be turned, but I think it'll be alright. So yeah, the next thing is to kind of try and decipher the brake pad that belongs on here, and the wheel cylinder, and we'll get some of this stuff on order. Alright, so I took the shoes off and I took the wheel cylinder off, and I've got some numbers here that I'm going to write down and hopefully source these things. I have no idea what front end this is. It's a 30s or early 40s Ford, but I don't know specifically, so hopefully that'll help. And I never would have attempted to try these, but you can see that the water got into the wheel cylinders pretty severely. As a matter of fact, this is all that's left of the push rods that go to the brake shoe. They were almost completely rotted through. So, alright, we're going to do a little bit of detective work to see if we can figure out what this is. While I'm in here, I'm going to knock this spindle off. This is a stub spindle that's bolted on. The thing that makes me nervous is, I think you folks can see the gap between the actual factory flange for the stub axle on the main axle itself, and then there's a gap. So I'm going to disassemble this and pop that off, the stub axle off, just to figure out why that's going on, and if it's something that can't be corrected by changing maybe some diameters so that slips on all the way. At the very least, I want to make sure that there's a good healthy spacer in there to shim it properly, because you're just asking the bolts to do the work of this wide flange, so that's not going to be safe. So, and it's the same on the passenger side as well, driver's side also. Alright, so I'm going to take it apart and see what that is causing that space, and see if there's a situation that I can improve upon. Alright, well, that answers that mystery. You can see that the step on the flange is supposed to engage with this step here, and this step on this flange here is way undersized for the step here. So probably throw this in the Bridgeport and stick the boring bar in there and open this up. I'll probably hit the surface of this with a cutter to smooth it out. So that's, you know, an answer as to why the gap was there. Somebody didn't have the means to do it, or just plain old didn't do it correctly. So that'll be a cleanup effort. I'm glad I took it apart. Sometimes you gotta trust your instincts. When you see something that's not right, figure out why. Those bolts would have eventually stretched and failed. Even just messing around with it in a nostalgia vintage lap
event around the track, even just parade laps with those big tires on there, eventually it probably would have caused it to fail. So I'm glad I took a look at it. Hopefully it shouldn't be too big of a deal to make it correct. You can see that how they turned this into a racing axle is they literally took a torch and cut the spindle stub off, and that made room for the, I believe this is a bolted on stub axle from the same type of axle that the quick change there in the back has, the full floating stub axle. Probably comes off the same year, make, and model rear end. Alright, so I'm going to grab some wheel bearing and seal part numbers, and we'll do a little research, see if we can source some of this stuff out. Okay, so the whole purpose of that exercise was to get this flange off. I'm going to regasket it, but this pinion flange seal was definitely leaking, so I'm going to hopefully get a part number off of this once I knock the seal out and get, this is an old basically friction type seal. So I'm hoping to get an actual, maybe a double lip neoprene seal or something like that to replace this. I can take the measurements off of this, I can clean this up so the surface is nice and smooth, and as a bonus I should be able to figure out what universal joint is utilized here. So that's the game plan here. One thing I noticed about this side is the wheel cylinder is indexed way down, and I'm quite certain that would potentially be a problem with bleeding the brakes. I think I'm going to have to go ahead and disconnect the axle tube and rotate it one position as far as clocking and index it so the wheel cylinder goes straight up and down. The opposite side is almost straight up and down. I think that one is in a much better position than this side, so I may actually go through the trouble of doing that, especially with me having to redo the axle brackets. By doing this, when this rear end was built, it's quite possible that the axle brackets were welded on, and they kind of said, whoops, too late now, and just kind of left it alone. But what I'll do is I'll index the axles so with the axle brackets cut off, and then I can put my axle brackets on wherever I would like them, knowing full well that the wheel cylinder is indexed perfectly. You can see that been busy gathering parts for the modified. Well, there it is, folks. That should be everything I need for the wheel bearings, the front brakes, wheel cylinders, hardware kits, front shoes, rear wheel cylinders, rear shoes, flexible brake lines for the front, and I think that's the majority of what's going on there. Alright, so I've got the front taken apart, and I had to do that to kind of research and try and figure out what this thing took for all the stuff associated with wheel bearings and brakes. Well, to run the safety hubs on the front, they cut the spindle off of the stock front end, and they used a Ford 3/4 ton trumpet is what it's called, from a full floating axle, and they bolted it to the front. So all four wheel bearings are the same for the inner and the same for the outer and the inner wheel bearing seals. So once I figured out the year, make and model, which was 1946 Ford 3/4 ton, the brakes on the rear, because these are 12-inch drums, they are 3/4 ton brakes. Half-ton brakes was 11.5 diameter, 3/4 ton was 12-inch diameter. However, the wheel cylinders were still half-ton, 1946. So that took care of the rear. The front, however, is still a 12-inch diameter drum, but this used a 1956 Buick Electra wheel cylinder and 1965 Buick LeSabre brake shoes and hardware. So it took me a long time to chase all this stuff down, and you saw the majority of the boxes were from Rock Auto, and that was the only place that I could pick through year by year and item by item, find the vendors that actually specified the drum diameter and the brake shoe thickness and the wheel cylinder bores and so on and so forth. So that's why it all came from Rock Auto. Alright, I don't know if I showed you folks this previously, but the seal surface on this was scored up and a portion of it was a little rusty. Well, I was able to find a speedy sleeve that's going to go on and provide a brand new seal bearing surface for the pinion for the quick change rear end. And the other thing I had to get was the seal for the pinion flange, and that actually came from eBay. Somebody had some new old stock seals in place for the exact replacement. I got the number off of the seal that was in here, and I got the exact replacement off of eBay. So new old stock, original boxes. So kind of cool. So McMaster Carr was the one that had the speedy sleeve, so that's where that came from. And I'm looking forward to getting, when I put the brakes back together, I really hope it's for the final time. So anyway, now it's a matter of having the drums turned, put the new bearings in, put the seals in, put the backing plates on, paint them, and then start assembling all of the hardware and the new parts. Alright, I'll keep you updated on the progress on the brakes on all four corners, and I'm going to start building the rear end now that I have all the pieces. So watch for that. Next time on KEI Fabrication. Alright folks, there's the finished product. Alright folks, that's it for this time. Remember, if you can't be good, be spectacular.